Welcome to the HR Huddle podcast, presented by Sapient Insights Group, the ultimate resource for all things HR. It's time to get in the huddle.
Welcome, everyone, to Spilling the Tea on HR Tech, where we focus on the hottest HR tech news and everyone needs to know to be in the know. We break down the news of the week and help you make sense of what it means for our industry and how it can impact your organization. I'm your host, Stacey Harris, Chief Research Officer and Managing Partner for Sapient Insights Group, a research and advisory firm. And joining me today is my amazing co-host, Cliff Stevenson, Director of Research and Principal Analyst. Welcome to the show, everyone. And Cliff, welcome to our episode following all of the crazy travel we've been doing, right?
Yeah, well, mostly you. I think you're the amazing one here. You've been all over. I'm going to have to get one of those maps with pins in it to track you down. But I've been doing some virtual traveling.
If you ever get time, I'd love to have a map like that. A friend of mine got one of those. And I'm thinking, I really need one of those in my office. So that's a great Christmas gift, I think, for anybody who travels a lot.
Yeah.
So what's on the topics today, Cliff?
Yeah, we've got a few pretty exciting things. We've got some news from Rippling. We've got some news from BetterWorks and Visier. We have some updates from Oracle, including some of that travel you were talking about, updates from Microsoft, and a kind of a feel-good news item from UKG as well that hopefully we'll have time to get to.
Yeah, it's quite a busy couple of weeks. And I know last week we sort of replayed some stuff that we were doing and preparing for our survey. So to add to all of what we talked about, we're getting ready to launch the annual HR Systems Survey in the coming week, right?
That's right. May 9th. Mark your calendars, everyone. But at the same time, take your time. Make sure the information's right. We're very excited. We have spent literal months making this survey easier to take, more intuitive, but at the same time, providing even more information when it all gets finished.
Yeah, this is exciting. It'll be your first time launching the survey. I remember that it was 2014 when I first did it. It's very... scary is not the right word, but just anticipatory, right? You're just like, oh my gosh, all this effort, all this energy. So maybe if we get some time at the end of the podcast, I'll talk a little bit about, ask you a little bit about some of the work you and Tammy are doing to get to the final wrap-up days when people start to see the link out there. So, but first, let's talk about all the news. Where do we want to start? Let maybe talk a little bit about the first one you had mentioned. I think we're seeing some really, I guess, coinciding information about what's going on with artificial intelligence and all the events that everybody's putting out this year, and sort of the tie-in to sort of some of the layoffs and everything. Are you seeing that sort of thread through all of these conversations?
Yeah, there's, not surprisingly, there's going to be some talk about AI and, generative AI and where it all fits and how things are being integrated. But one thing that was interesting to me as we talk about those layoffs is this news about Rippling. So what is going on is that the CEO, Parker Conrad, who you might remember from Zenefits, he has announced that there will be an IPO. Now, this is no specific date, just that there'll be, something up ahead that will be, their payroll and, HCM offering from Rippling. And what was kind of stood out to me is not just that it was an IPO for a well-known company, but that last month, amid that whole Silicon Valley Bank crisis, you might remember,
yes,
that Rippling raised $500 million from Green Oaks Capital and have an $11 billion valuation. So pretty amazing stuff that there's still a lot of interest and a lot of value being seen for these type of products for HR tech.
Yeah, it's fascinating to me. I think, you kind of almost have to separate a little bit. I mean, part of the challenge with what happened with Parker Conrad and his, history with Zenefits is that there were some missteps made. There's some real compliance and legal issues trying to sort of automate certification for benefits selling, which was a really, sort of no because people are supposed to be trained on their own, all of those kind of things. But I do think what we're seeing is that sort of that go fast mentality when it comes to the HR tech space is still valued by a lot of organizations, right? And that's definitely what you're seeing here is this idea that people with big ideas and who are willing to take some risks, have some opportunities still in this market. I will say that, it'll be interesting, saying you're going to go IPO and going IPO are two different things. Now, it does have an impact on your investors, even in a private environment, and it has an impact on sort of what is happening to other organizations who are similar to you, who are out there, who are already public, right? Like that has, so it's not just a statement that you throw out, and it tends to be a little bit more like a little bit of a rock in a pond, all the ripples that come out of it, right?
Oh, that's nice. Rippling. I got it.
There, man, I didn't even think about that when I said it. There you go.
That's how good you are. So I guess, following that news, talking about, just what's going on in the industry, it's a pretty interesting bit of partnership going on. BetterWorks and Visier working together under the BetterWorks platform, it seamlessly integrating Visier's people analytics will be the news here, right? So it'll be called BetterWorks Advanced Analytics in the BetterWorks platform. I went to the BetterWorks conference, the virtual conference, a couple of weeks ago to kind of get a little more info there. And what it does is it looks like it takes the things that are great about Visier of kind of seeing the insights from the data, separating the signal from the noise type of thing, but putting it immediately within employee development, right? So you can say, okay, this I can see in sort of real time, this type of intervention, this type of training worked better than another, for instance, for this group. So let's shift more resources towards that type of training, as an example, and kind of a dashboard and seeing where everything's going rather than going to a platform, checking everything out and then going back, right? So I think there's some value there.
Well, and it's as well worth noting that with Visier, for the longest time, Visier was really just a solution for the largest companies, like most enterprise analytics platforms are, because they're very expensive, they're complex. You've got to have a lot of tools that are integrated and data sort of flowing into them. But Visier started several years back, this embedded program, and one of the very first organizations that took them up was Paycor. And there's been several others since that, where Visier is now the embedded analytics solution to multiple HR and talent solutions out in the market. This is one of the newest ones. And, their numbers jumped from 300-400 large enterprise organizations who are using them pretty effectively to up to 7,000 plus, right? I think the numbers are coming in at. And I've always been a big proponent that we need to get analytics. We need to get beyond reporting, which is done in almost all of these systems, to an analytics conversation where we're comparing and analyzing data against each other, even at the mid-market and SMB level. And this kind of embedded capability absolutely does that, right? It just broadens and widens the ability for people to look at data and analyze it in a way that provides answers versus just a report that you then have to sort of figure out how to leverage that data. Right. I'm excited to see where this goes, because I'd have to look back at their partnerships, but I don't remember anyone particularly in this kind of engagement space that's made such big news of it, I guess I would say.
Right.
And so it'll be interesting to see how that impacts what BetterWorks does down the road as well, right?
Absolutely. And like you touched on, it's pretty cool because we're now bringing these sort of more advanced capabilities to smaller organizations. And that is thematic of the rippling news as well, right? We're seeing a lot of interest in growth and how we can give a lot more capabilities to smaller organizations as their needs are growing, or maybe it's just that people are realizing that their needs were never all that different, were they?
And maybe that moves right into sort of the other two sort of events that you and I both sort of are following this week. One was the event I went to, which is the Oracle HCM, Oracle Application and Industry Analyst Summit. That was it was in the Bay Area at the location in Redwoods for Oracle, and it was a good event, but it was very focused on sort of the depth and breadth of what Oracle is trying to do across all enterprise application areas, right? So it really started out with a lot of conversation from Steve Miranda, who heads up, obviously, the entire sort of cloud strategy and all of the enterprise application areas. And he was really talking about the next generation cloud infrastructure that Oracle had put in place, with the idea that it goes across not just Oracle HCM as we know it, but also NetSuite, which is a really big play for the SMB market, as well as all the other healthcare solutions and tools that they're sort of and customer care tools and all the other solutions that they've picked up and put into their sort of application space, right? And so this was a good event because it kind of crossed all of those areas. But I thought it was really interesting that their cloud infrastructure, they've really invested heavily in their OCI, as they call it, right? They're trying to really be a competitive solution compared to like an Amazon Web Services or Azure for Microsoft, right? They said their performance now is up by 30% faster. They've got security at every layer now. Their SLA availability is now at 99%. I thought those were pretty big numbers for them because I know they were having a little bit of struggles in those areas for a little while. They now have 41 global cloud regions, which is a big issue because a lot of the reason people leverage someone like an Amazon or an Azure is because they need to have a solution in a country or region, right? That where they can save and hold their data and be underneath the various regulations of the regions and countries. So it was a good event to sort of realize that these big companies that oftentimes the longest time were just speaking to enterprise platform owners, meaning companies, of 10,000 plus primarily, right? Or 5,000 plus primarily. They really are now looking at the mid-market and the SMB market as a viable option for all of these tools that they're putting out in the market. I mean, Cliff, you just actually you're getting ready to launch our first sort of SMB paper, right? Yeah. Do you think that the SMB organizations are ready for this kind of level of complexity that the organizations are starting to bring down to them, that for workforce planning and data analysis and data security, all of those things?
I think they're beyond ready for it. I think they're hungry for it. I think that there was probably a correct assumption that because of the localized nature of most SMBs pre-pandemic, although it had already started heading this way, the pandemic just sped things up. It didn't change the course at all, right? That, they just didn't need as much complexity because they didn't have to worry about regulatory environments or, working across a whole lot of different lines of business, for instance. But that's no longer the case. A lot of organizations are doing a lot with very few employees, right? There's a huge difference between being small in employee count and small in revenue. Yeah. And I think that as they are now seeing what's the possibilities, seeing what they can do, they're only asking for more and sometimes even needing more, requiring more. And, there's, a couple options, right? We can have companies start up and support that, or we can have these larger companies sort of looking and going, hey, there's a whole market here that's eager and hungry for a lot of what we have to offer. And like you said, for instance, like the data analytics, that used to be something, okay, that, only the largest companies are going to be doing these sort of predictive models. But no, now you can do them and you don't need a whole lot of training and it's not too expensive. Why wouldn't a small business also want to do this type of forecasting? And why wouldn't they want to make sure that everything they do is completely legal and above board when they're paying people now that they have a lot more remote employees, right? So all of these different use cases, I think, contribute to the fact that there's just not a lot of difference in need. There's just difference in application of HR tech.
And I think what we're seeing from the vendors themselves is they're actually leaning into some of these small business needs, and it's actually supporting it, sort of improving the whole market. So, for example, one of the big announcements that Oracle had this week, again, not specifically HR, but has an impact on HR, is that they are now have a integrated banking services with JP Morgan. And as many of us know, JP Morgan's kind of the bank right now that's doing a lot of the, I would say, rescuing in the market, right, of various smaller banks that are struggling a little bit here and there. And what that means for Oracle is that they've got, they're honing in on industry services like healthcare and manufacturing and a couple others. But importantly, with this kind of a relationship, they're now connecting processes to the banking services in a much faster way. So things like integrated banking services for connectivity, integrated corporate card services, which is really a powerful tool for many employees and improving employee experience. And then automated financing, which is offering direct access to financing solutions All of that means that, there's a lot less having to go from one solution to another, from one vendor to another with your money to get all the transactions to happen, right? And that, I think, is the kind of things that SMB organizations are really hungry for, because they don't have the resources to manage the complexity of a multi-level sort of finance sort of process, right? For them, having that kind of integration makes a big impact. The other things we saw announced this week, which I thought were really powerful, is that Oracle is definitely taking a lot of their complex solutions like Oracle Journeys, Oracle Help Desk, Oracle Learning, and they're bundling them into what I would consider more streamlined workflows for their buyers. And this is going to help big companies as well as small companies. One of the things that they announced this week, which we talked a little bit about last time because they did a pre-event conversation about it, is this Oracle Grow conversation, which is creating a workflow and a series of connection points around career pathing. And one of the things that we saw at this event was Oracle sort of demoed their ability to embed various artificial intelligence and some level of generative AI. They didn't give us a good sort of clear understanding of what exactly that level was, but various versions of sort of generative AI in that Grow workflow, if you would call it, right? That at Oracle Grow, with the idea of giving people jump starts for things like job profiles or for goal writing. Now, they were also, like what we've seen with other organizations, very careful about understanding that, you have to make sure you know where that data is going. There was a lot of conversations about the data sitting all within the Oracle environment, all within the customer's environment. So we did have several of that conversation. Oracle hinted at the fact that they have a partner that they're going to be announcing in a few weeks for what they're doing with that sort of generative AI conversation. So I think we're going to see a lot more of that from all the vendors. It was definitely a big part of what was going on at this event, was a lot of that conversation. They also had a lot of customers who they kind of shared how they were leveraging not just human capital or Oracle HCM, but leveraging the industry tools and connecting that to the HCM conversation. So it was very much a conversation about how having a complete enterprise platform makes the data work better, makes the skills work better, makes the ability to do analytics and reporting more valuable. That was the big message that came out of this week's event. So it'll be interesting to see where the rest of it goes. A lot of it was under NDA, so I can't say a whole lot, but it was good to see that. I think we're starting to see a lot of these vendors focus not just on what artificial intelligence, that it can be embedded, but that it has a role that we have to strategically think about, that is not just about sort of making the job of HR easier, but also about helping HR take that step to a more strategic conversation, right?
That's exactly it. I found it to be a pretty positive development. And for any of the listeners, the things that are still available that are public, you can see by going to Oracle Grow. You can type that in and see some of the use of AI. And that's just it. I like to see AI in these sort of situations, right? Where it's, where you're trying to figure out, how do I move to the next step of my career? And by using these sort of programs, it can figure out what are the best both internal and external resources that you can leverage. And it's sort of using what's known and what has worked for you in the past to make a more personalized development and career path plan for you. And that's great, right? That sounds way less scary than AI is coming to take our jobs, right? So,
yeah, and just two last announcements I want to make about what we found out at the Oracle, and then we can sort of maybe move on to the Microsoft conversation. They did announce, I think, for anybody out there who's looking at payroll, they're now up to 16 native country payrolls. At least, again, I haven't done the look at every one of them, but that's the number they're giving us. It's probably worth noting that PeopleSoft, I think, topped out at 19 or 20, somewhere in that range, I believe. So they're right in range of and they're planning to continue to increase their, what we would consider global native payrolls, which is important because it's very different than just an aggregator model, which we see from a lot of the other organizations. The other thing that they announced, which I thought was interesting and worth noting, is that they're now at a point where they've got the Redwood design, as they're calling it, in development system, which is a mix of user interface and microservices in the background, reusable designing elements, and a UX tool set and design tool set that all their programmers are sharing, so that you're going to start to see a more consistent look across all the Oracle platforms, not just HCM, but across other applications as well. So I think that's probably interesting to start to note, that you're going to start to see that sort of cross application area using this sort of Redwood design development model that they've got. And then that they've launched and gotten really good, I think, outcomes from their new Connected Community event, which is their online community. That was something Oracle, I think, was lacking a little bit for quite some time. They've invested heavily in that, particularly in the HR space, and they're now starting to see some traction on that. And so those are some big announcements, I think, and updates that are worth noting if you're sort of following the Oracle application area. So
that's a lot. Wow, that's pretty cool. So you mentioned the Microsoft Copilot. Go ahead.
Well, so this was Microsoft. They did a Microsoft Viva Summit again, just not last week, the week before last, right? And it's worth mentioning because it was really focused on all of the artificial intelligence. That was probably the major conversation that I saw coming out of it. Most importantly, they were sort of announcing the relationship of Microsoft Copilot with the Viva application. So if you haven't sort of followed what's going on with OpenAI and generative AI, Copilot is Microsoft's version of taking what was sort of created for generative AI and embedding it in the Microsoft tool set, right?
That's right.
And it's a great sort of tool that's going to, their perspective is it's really going to not just be Clippy, which I think is the very fear that everybody has. Oh, we all remember Clippy, but it's actually supposed to be able to guide you and add not just design elements to your PowerPoints and those kind of things like what we're doing now, but actually help you move faster through your work. It'll give you recommendations on how to get things done, and it'll give you recommendations on how to get documents started. It's just going to be a much more valuable tool set across the Microsoft suite of solutions. And what they were really noting is that it's going to be embedded in Viva. You're going to see a lot of it in the Viva as recommendations for next steps to take, for learning, for recommendations and coaching, for recommendations in how you might get better engagement with employees, which is all the stuff that Viva has been trying to work with. It's important to note, the hard part about Microsoft Viva is it's not a single sort of all-in-one platform. It's a lot of different solutions that are sort of brought together under sort of more of a push mentality to your Microsoft Teams environment or your Microsoft SharePoint environment, wherever you're sort of accessing all of that information. But I think the biggest announcement here is that if you're valuing what Copilot and the artificial intelligence that is going on in your overall Microsoft environment is starting to support, you're going to get value out of it also in the Viva environment. That was kind of what I got out of it. I don't know, Cliff, if you read any more into it.
No, that's it. And that's sort of, as we said, sort of the running theme is that we're seeing a lot more of AI being embedded in to sort of support and enhance existing products. So Copilot, according to Microsoft, will be previewing later this year. And as Stacey said, Viva, has a number of different sort of submodules or whatever you want to think of it, but Viva Glint, Viva Goals, Viva Engage, and Viva Topics, and will be enhanced in Viva Sales. So that's something to look at for many of us that are running the Microsoft products. I know we're really tight on time. Can I make one quick announcement before we wrap up?
Definitely. Go ahead.
So this is just one that sort of hit my sort of areas of interest. I'm both, an HR and data fan and also a soccer fan. That's actually what I did for a living way long ago. So UKG is working with the National Women's Soccer League, the NWSL, that's the United States Professional Women's Soccer League, to announce a pay equity milestone. They're basically have doubled the prize pool for the NWSL Challenge Cup, a tournament style thing, so that they have already increased the pool for the prize pool tenfold last year, and they're doubling it again this year. And it's all tied into a program they're doing where they are putting 17 cents per employee that's run on UKG payroll, because that's the gap, right? That's the average gap between female and males, and putting that towards these type of programs, towards awareness, towards education programs. So I just think that that's pretty cool to see, something beyond just saying, hey, we should do more, but, kind of literally putting their money where their mouth is. So
I love
pretty neat.
this.
Happy story. Yeah. Isn't it great?
This is really cool. Yeah. And I mean, we've seen other things like this, I think, in the market. I mean, there's a lot of, but this is tightly connected, right? And it has, I always tell people, I'm like, when you're going to be putting together these kind of programs where you really are, wanting to make a change and make a difference, it's all about where the money's at. It's all about how sustainable is it? And is it more than just a marketing piece? And this feels like more than just a marketing piece, right? Like they're really investing in it.
Exactly. I think over 3 million has gone into this program. So,
wow.
And that's from that 17 cents.
And the soccer connection for you. I mean, I knew about your soccer background. I don't know if our audience knew as well. I mean, Cliff, you were like right in there at the major soccer level, right? Like you were played soccer in college, but then you went on beyond that, didn't you?
I did. I played overseas for a little while at extremely low leagues. If we were comparing it to baseball, it would be like the independent or maybe single A if we're being generous. But then also did coaching and refereeing and ran soccer camps and ran leagues and just did everything I could to avoid getting a real job.
No. Believe me, any of that work is hard. So let's not discount that. I get it that it feels like you're playing, but I think that's the best type of job is when you feel like you're playing, right?
It's funny for any of the people that, I meet, this is always a funny anecdote. I always remember sitting around one day, mid-20s, getting towards retirement age for an athlete. And we're sitting there and we're like, one day, man, we're going to sit in an office and we will be in AC all day. We won't have to run. We won't wake up sore. And it's so funny then going to office being like, oh, I would have loved to have played pro. And I was like, that's funny because we always wanted to be you guys.
Yeah. You never know. The grass always looks a little bit greener on the other side, right? Yeah. But so for any of our soccer fans out there, if you see Cliff out at some of the events, you got another soccer fan, or football if you're over outside the US, right? Not my forte. I will have to say sports was something that I was the kid they put on the basketball team and I ran the wrong way. And thank God I was such a bad shot that even though I tried to make a shot for the other team, it didn't get in anyway. So
well, that was me at basketball too. So
yeah. So I think if you're wanting to talk sports, Cliff's going to be the right one on our team. Well, we are out of time, but we've gone through, I think, all the big topics this week. For anybody who is looking to sort of connect with us over the next couple of weeks, Cliff and I are going to be mostly doing client events. I don't think there's any big vendor events that we'll be at, but in June, we've got a couple of events that we'll be doing in New York and in Canada, in Toronto and Chicago. So listen for those. We'll have updates on that in the coming weeks as to when we'll be there and where you can meet up with us at those events. We also, I think, just got posted on the HR Tech Conference. If you haven't made the decision yet or not, if you're going to be attending the HR Tech Conference this fall, they just announced our workshop, which we've been doing for the last 2 years, again at that event. And so if you're interested in attending our Building a Adaptive Strategic HR Systems Strategy workshop, you get it for free by attending the HR Technology Conference event in Las Vegas, put on by the HR Technology Organization. And so we're really excited about being able to do that again for the industry and to do those type of events. We're going to get a chance to see everybody. As we're wrapping up today, quick reminders to our listeners, you can access the key findings that we talked about a little bit here, as well as the new SMB paper, if you're interested in our updated data on the SMB market on our website. And also you can download last year's HR Tech keynote session that we did, all there at our website at sapientinsights.com. If you're interested in getting more in-depth data or support in your HR strategy journey, just drop us a line at info@sapientinsights.com as well to schedule some time to chat, and sign up for our newsletter to get ongoing updates on research, launches, where we'll be speaking or visiting, and when you can participate in our annual survey. Quick thank you to our production team who continues to make sure that all of this happens and gets put and packaged up in a way that you can access it. Brand Method Media Group, who helps us produce our podcast, run by their amazing founder, Kelly, and our marketing group, Lisa Renko and Zoe Britton, who make sure everything gets done and announced for everyone. And thanks to you, our listener community. We couldn't do this without you. This is really our opportunity to share some of the stuff that we're learning every week with you. And we would love to hear back from you if you have any comments on how we can continue to improve this podcast to give you your weekly update of news and interesting hot tea for the week. So that's it for this episode of Spilling the Tea on HR Tech. We hope it's been just the brew you need to start your engines running for this week. If you enjoyed this episode and you'd like to help support the podcast, please subscribe and leave a rating and review where you can grab your podcast. To stay up to date with immediate breaking HR tech news, feel free to get all the behind the scenes content, and you can follow me at Sapient Insights, as well as on LinkedIn at Stacey Harris HR and at Stacey Harris HR on Twitter. And Cliff, how can they reach you if they're interested in following you now?
Yeah, you can find me at Cliff Stevenson on LinkedIn. You can also find me at Clifford Durrell, 2 R's, 2 L's on Twitter. I've applied for Blue Sky. The quickness of these socials means that may not mean anything by the time you get it, but we'll see. But anytime you're looking for me on a social, I'll either be Clifford Durrell or you can just do Cliff Stevenson HR, and I'll be that one.
Sounds good. All right, everyone. We'll be back in 2 weeks with another pot of HR tech updates and insights for you. Thanks, everyone. Bye.